Hello and welcome to iMedia Network, your go-to channel for breaking down the headlines, analyzing the issues, and exploring the stories that matter most. I'm your host, Absalam Isa, also known as Halal Developer, and joining me is Engineer Jibril Ibrahim, a respected public affairs analyst and creative director at iMedia Communications. In our last video together, we answered certain questions about the Israel-Hamas ceasefire, and Engineer Jibril mentioned to us that as at that time, the agreement hasn't been completely reached, as Netanyahu had to still discuss with the Israeli authorities. As of Sunday, 19 January, we saw videos of Hamas releasing Israeli hostages. That shows that a clear agreement has been reached, and it will be important that we update the world on the new developments. So, can you run us through the ceasefire agreement again, and has any party broken any of the agreements?
All right, so the ceasefire agreement is largely, like we discussed in the last program, a series or a multi-stage agreement to de-escalate and potentially stop the current fighting and potentially even have like a permanent solution to the Israeli-Palestinian issue. And the first stage of it, which started yesterday, is that Israel will release 90 Palestinian hostages, while the Hamas group will release 3 Israeli hostages of the hostages that they have with them. That's like the first stage. And the interesting thing with that stage is that what that means is that the life of one hostage that the Palestinian took is equivalent to 30 Palestinian hostages that the Israel took as prisoners, because Israel takes a lot of people. And the interesting thing is how Israel has a tendency to call the Palestinians prisoners. I mean, you are talking of children, young children, women that were taken from their homes, and Israel still wants to call them prisoners, which is definitely a dehumanizing way to look at things. And as it is now, they take a lot of people, while the Hamas or Palestinians have just a handful of less than what they have left is probably less than even 100 Israeli hostages, essentially. So the agreement is to release 30 Palestinian hostages held by Israel for every one that Hamas holds. So the first stage of the agreement, which is what was implemented yesterday, one part of it was that 3 Israeli hostages will be released for 90 Palestinian hostages. And that was done. Another important part of that agreement is that the Palestinians can now return to every part of the Gaza Strip to go and look for their houses. And that's actually the very painful, a very, disturbing sight to see. You see Palestinians now going back to their neighborhoods and looking for their houses. I mean, it is when I see the scenes of this kind of thing that I realize that when you are going home, there are quite a number of things that you get used to. Like there is this building that is before your turn, before your house, then you take a right turn and then you go home. But when all the buildings have been demolished, you don't even know. You just get there and you are wondering, where is my house? You might even be in front of your house that was probably a multi-story building and you won't be able to recognize it because it has been demolished, it has been bombed out, and it's really gruesome because many of those houses even have people's children, loved ones, mothers, women, children, potentially still under some of those rubbles. Is a painful thing. It's a painful situation to be for the Palestinians, but that is their reality. And Alhamdulillah, at least if this ceasefire continues, the killing, the death would stop. Another important part of this stage of the ceasefire agreement is allowing aid trucks to come in. All this while, it has been very difficult to get aid into the Gaza Strip. But with this agreement that they have, they are able to move. I think yesterday, within the last time that the agreement started, they've moved close to 600 trucks have moved aids into Gaza, which is definitely a step forward. This aids will include shelter, will include food, will fuel to power generators, to provide power supply to a lot of things. So it's really a big step forward in improving the lives of the Palestinians. So in a nutshell, this stage of the agreement includes: one, Israel withdraws from the populated areas so the Palestinians can move back into their neighborhoods. Two, they would exchange one Israeli hostage for 30 in a ratio of 1 to 30. So Palestinians, the Hamas group are releasing 3 for 90 Israeli hostages. And then 3, aids and support services can now start entering into Gaza. So this stage of 3 for 90 will go on for the next 10 weeks. And this is going to be a major activity if you are going to continue this for the next. So over the next 10 weeks, you'll be having 3 per week, every weekend for 10 weeks. That will be 30 in all. And Israel will have released 900 Palestinians. And the people that are being released at this stage of the agreement are the civilians. They are largely civilians that both sides had captured. It is after this stage that real warriors or soldiers will be negotiated for their release. So you will have Palestinians demanding specific war fighters that were captured to be released, while Israel will also demand for some of their own soldiers to be released. And in this stage, the ratio might be more than 1 for 30. The ratio might be, the Palestinians might demand up to 50 of their soldiers for one Israeli soldier that they hold. We do not know yet. But that is meant to be negotiated as within these 10 weeks of this first stage of it. It is the faithful implementation of this first stage of it that would enable them to have to decide how they want to do the second phase of it. And with the success of the second phase of it, they will be able to go into the third phase of it, which is where the issues of reconstruction, issues of Israel withdrawing from the Philadelphia corridor that we discussed, and some of these very difficult stages of the conflict will be resolved.
Why is that so?
One thing that we find interesting with this conflict is the global implication and the global reaction and ramifications of this conflict. One thing that is abundantly clear is that the world perceives Hamas to have won this stage or this conflict. Even though they've lost a lot of civilians, you will see from the streets of Gaza yesterday that they have not lost their military capacity. And this was one of the core objectives of the Israeli Defense Forces, that they were going to destroy Hamas and destroy Hamas' ability to be a force in that place. Fortunately or unfortunately as it is, that is a failed objective. This is part of why it's very difficult, and Netanyahu is currently feeling very humiliated. And it's difficult for him to even convince his cabinet to agree to this ceasefire, because they are saying, no, Hamas has not been destroyed. And he's saying, we've destroyed all that we can destroy. It's like you have an animal, maybe the way they say a cockroach or something, that doesn't die. You've killed it, you've stamped it, you've bombed it, but it's still alive and kicking. So it creates a very difficult situation for Israel. So on one hand, generally it's being perceived that the Hamas group won this war in a way. And another key objective of the Israel in this conflict, when after the October 7 event, was that they were going to get all the hostages back. They did not get the hostages back. It is by negotiation now that they are getting the hostages back, and people are criticizing them that they could have done this negotiation before thousands of innocent people died, if truly they were into protecting the civilian, as they sometimes claim. But one thing we'll see, one thing that is worthy of note is that why is Israel agreeing to this ceasefire now? I mean, they should have. This same proposal had been on their table since. And the obvious thing is that Donald Trump has put clear pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu that they must come to an agreement, and the fighting and the killing has to stop. And with Donald Trump being sworn in yesterday, he threatened and pressurized Benjamin Netanyahu that this killing, this conflict had to stop. So it was actually the amount of pressure that the Donald Trump that was sworn in yesterday applied over the last 1 week, 2 weeks that made this to happen. Because for the last 8 months, Joe Biden had been trying to get Israel to agree to this. And for Israel, it's just too humiliating to, one, not be able to destroy Hamas despite all the bombs, all the raids, all the armor tanks against people that they believe were just using Kalashnikov, AK-47 rifles and rocket-propelled grenades. So they've spent 13 months and they could not knock these guys out. I mean, I'm saying 13 months, 15 months, and they could not, destroy these guys. They could not get back the hostages, and you are asking them for ceasefire. So Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu was not going to have a ceasefire. But I mean, the fact of the matter is Israel is largely supported by America. So if you have a leader like Donald Trump that could say, my guy, you have to stop this thing or else, it's the or else that made Benjamin Netanyahu to agree to this thing. Because one of the or else is that I will just stop supporting you. I will stop giving you weapons. Because it's not Israel that is producing the weapons. Israel population is barely 10 million. That's less than the population of Lagos State or Kano State. The whole Israel that we are talking about, that is so it is not really Israel that is the force. They don't even have the economy. They don't have the production manpower. What they have has been the support of America and the West in general. That's what they've been using to carry out this oppression, this genocide, and everything that they've been doing. And some of the interesting thing that you will see that happened also in the course of this war is that normally the voice of the Palestinians would not have been heard throughout this conflict. Why we are all hearing about it now is because of social media. Before now, the main media platforms, newspaper, radio, television networks across the world were largely controlled by governments, by interests and everything. So the world could not get some of the visuals except what was allowed to be aired. But with social media, the Palestinians could film things and send it out to the world on social media. And before recently, during this war, the major media platforms or social media platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter did not allow censor the voice of Palestine. So if you were doing a video that had a negative description of Israel, it will have been suppressed. They will just dial it down that it violates their terms and you will not just get it out. So one place that had actually done a lot of benefits for the public, for the Palestinian, was the TikTok. And with that, the American media, the American society actually, because of Israel, enacted a law to ban TikTok from America. So they went through, it was contested till their Supreme Court also agreed to ban TikTok. And that went into effect on Saturday. But because Donald Trump came in, he was like, no, we are not banning TikTok and everything, because he had also suffered similar censorship. So TikTok went dead in the whole of America for 24 hours. And then it was back up immediately. Donald Trump was sworn in and everything. So this, further shows how the West sometimes uses their power, their economic influence, their media influence, their military influence to force the world into their worldview. But some of these things are changing as technology becomes available to a lot more people, and the balance, the difference in capacity between America and a lot of other nations and civilizations, the gap is reducing, and some of those influence and controls are not as heavy as they used to be.
Thank you very much, Engineer Jibril Ibrahim. I look forward to breaking down more headlines with you, analyzing trending issues, and exploring the stories that matter most. I remain your host, Absalam Issa Peace, also known as the Halal Developer. Bye for now.